The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
And welcome to BronxTalk, the Bronx's flagship television talk show. The phones are open tonight, so don't hesitate to give us a ring and have your say. You can call into the show at 718-960-7241. You can also email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future program. Well, the way that information is delivered and communicated in our world is changing, whereas radio, TV, and newspapers used to provide the foundation for media and communication. Just recently, the FCC indicated that the internet has surpassed television as America's most popular medium. Here in the Bronx, while we do have a good network of local papers, we also have an emerging network of internet blogs to share information and opinion. Tonight, two Bronx blog creators are here to talk about their blogs, the Bronx, and this new wave of technology and how it affects us in our home borough of the Bronx. Please join me in welcoming from the Boogie Downer, blogspot.com, Lou Boogie Downer Chickalese. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
And from welcome to Melrose.com, sometimes known as the mayor of Melrose, they say, Ed Garcia Conde. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Lou, let's start with you. Give us a little background on the creation of Boogie Downer. How did we get from not having Boogie Downer to now having Boogie Downer?
Well, as you said, a lot of the information that we get is online, and I was no stranger to that. And I would, when I was a recent immigrant to the Bronx from Brooklyn, would search high and low for information about my new neighborhood. And there's stuff about every neighborhood you could imagine in Manhattan and in Queens and in Brooklyn, and there was virtually nothing for the Bronx. I will say that the blog formerly known as the West Bronx blog, now Bronx News Network, was great, and I used to read that all the time. And I actually got started commenting on this message board that for some reason it was a citywide message board, but it had a real preponderance of Bronx people. And everybody sharing stories about these hidden gems.
I'm curious, what was that? Somehow I've missed one along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a blog. It's just an open message board about the city. And people will put different things up. What do you know about this neighborhood? Or here's something that I did. And I figured, how do we aggregate all this stuff and make sure that everybody knows it? And sort of went through some brainstorming and decided to start a blog spot. It's free to start.
How long ago did that happen?
August of 2008.
Mm-hmm. And are you satisfied? Are you happy? Do you like it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's really fantastic that people are able to get a lot of their news. We don't, we're not journalists. We don't claim to be journalists, but it's great to be able to tell people, here's a new restaurant, or here's some, affordable real estate, or here's what's happening at the Botanical Garden, or all sorts of different things that people seem to have an appetite for.
And I should add that you don't shy away from controversial
things.
No,
sir.
We're going to talk about some of those things as well. Did you ever say to yourself, like many years ago, say, gee, one day I'm going to be a reporter, or I'm going to be I guess we never thought we'd have blogs or anything like that?
No, sir. Never had any aspirations of journalism. I guess the most I've ever did was write for my high school newspaper one article, and that's about it.
You happy? You like it? You love it?
Yeah, absolutely. I must say, I must defer to my wife. She does most of the heavy lifting because she stays home. I do a lot of the reviews and a little bit of the real estate, but she's really the heavy lifter in the blog relationship.
We're going to bring Ed, Mayor Ed, into the conversation in just a moment. But I want to just understand a little bit about the amount of information and the amount of time you spend on it. Do you spend a lot of time on it? Do you and your wife spend a lot of time?
My wife spends more time than I do.
Because she's home, you have a child, and
yes,
she's home
yes,
with a child.
yes.
Okay.
Beautiful Pearl.
Okay. And now you're a school teacher.
I am.
Do the kids in school know that you are the Boogie Downer?
They don't, but a few of my students actually found it and came up and told me that they found it, and they said, I promise I wasn't stalking you, but I found this.
Well,
and they thought it was
Google
cool. Yeah,
will
exactly.
turn it
It's not
up.
hard. It's not hard.
All right, Mayor.
Nothing to hide.
Mayor Ed, how did you become, before we even get to welcome to Melrose, how did you become the mayor of Melrose, so to speak?
Well, it's always been a joke with family and friends and some of the local business owners because I've always loved Melrose. I loved where I came from, and I pretty much knew everything that was always going on in that small little neighborhood, and that's pretty much how I got that name.
Small little neighborhood with thousands and thousands of people in the Bronx. We don't have small little neighborhoods. So tell me about Welcome to Melrose, about how long ago and why did it get started and how did it get started?
Well, I started Welcome to Melrose back in September, and actually my influence was the Boogie Downers. And I was actually very happy to see, a blog coming on the Bronx scene, showing us positive things about the Bronx, not just the negative things that we were always seeing in the media. So I decided to do something for Melrose for the same reasons that Lou mentioned. You would Google Melrose and you would not get anything. I mean, pretty much outdated news. You would just see a lot of old clippings of the Bronx's burning and empty lots and things like that. And I was kind of just, this is not what my neighborhood is anymore. And I wanted to show not just the Bronx in New York, but the world that the Bronx isn't burning anymore, especially my neighborhood, which was hit so bad in the 70s and 80s.
And certainly has undergone, sections of it have undergone, revolutions, as it were, but not all of it, of course. How do you determine what should be on the blog? I mean, there's a million things out there. You could walk down the block and tell a story about something that happened in the pharmacy on a particular day. Maybe you do that, but how do you determine really a sum total what should be in there?
Pretty much recommendations from people in the neighborhood, some of the business owners, and things that I like to highlight is the new real estate developments that have been going on and some of the local history. Melrose, it's pretty diverse, so there's so much that you can pick from, like you said. But mostly I try to just stay with the positive things, being that like I said, we have the media already collecting the negative news, so why highlight that?
Through the show, and Jane is also directing tonight. Thank you to Jane for doing that. But let's get we'll put some of the web pages up there so people can actually see what it looks like. Let's do Boogie Downer and ask you the same question. How do you decide what goes up there? Now, you look at the whole Bronx. You really look at just things in your section of the Bronx. How do you decide?
Basically, whatever really we think is really interesting. You can sort of tell by the amount of stuff we cover in great detail that there's a little bit of bias toward Bedford Park, Norwood, Van Cortlandt Village, because we live in the area, so it's easy to walk to things. But we will go and visit Mott Haven. We'll pick up stories from anywhere. And there are some recurring things that we have. So my wife does a roundup. She sort of aggregates a lot of the different news stories from the Bronx almost every day. I used to do a listing of the day, profiling particular real estate, but it's way too hard with my teaching and coaching schedule. If we go to a new restaurant, we
talk about it. We just took a look at many of the features that you had there, the roundup and everything else that you have in there. When you put the stuff up there, are you dying to get response? Because sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. I mean, it's almost like what we do on this TV show.
I mean, it's very surprising when you get response and when you don't. Sometimes stories that seem to not have any legs get a whole lot of response, and sometimes you're going to get a large response. So when we were commenting pretty heavily about the Armory or Cara, I mean, it was an incendiary issue on both sides, and people commented, and
I was on there.
You were. Thank you for commenting.
I was definitely on there.
In some ways, a blog's only as good as its commenters. It's sort of a conversation a forum.
And what about for you, Ed? Excuse me, Mayor Ed. In terms of, are you playing to a specific audience? Are you just thinking of all my neighbors in Melrose? When you put it out there, I mean, I know what I think about when I do this TV show. What do you think about?
Well, I think about, first and foremost, my neighbors and people in my neighborhood, trying to instill a sense of pride in where they live. And then the secondary audience is basically the world stage. There's a lot of people stumbling upon the site looking for things about the Bronx and things like that. So I try to cater to everybody.
Let's put that welcome to Melrose up there. And now, what about response? Now, I realize your target audience, as we say in the TV business, may be a little smaller than the universe that Boogie Downer is working with. Do you get response? There's you can see the village of Melrose right there. Welcome to Melrose.com. Tell me about who's on there. Who do you think looks at it and responds?
Well, when I put up the article that I did on...
Oh, and I love that one, by the way, that BronxTalk thing. That is fantastic. And I actually commented on that.
When I actually put up, when I did the piece on the old Bronx courthouse, which the owner contacted me and his business partner, that actually received a lot of attention because it's something that's been sitting there for 30 years or more, empty, and it pretty much stirred people from not just in the Bronx and in the neighborhood, but across the city and different parts of the country. People who used to live in the neighborhood, who remember that courthouse just sitting there.
There's a lot of dialogue in media in general about blogs because anybody, in essence, could start one, and certainly just about anybody could reply on one. Talk to me about the responsibility that you have as being the blogger. I mean, you could advocate for anything that you want. Give me your kind of editorial vision of how you view what should be there and how you characterize things, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, as far as characterizing things, I really try to thoroughly research whatever I'm going to put up. I just don't, just put anything up or my own opinions, but I try to give both sides as best as possible. I don't want to see too heavily biased for the positive sides, and that's pretty much my focus.
I think people, frankly, wouldn't believe it if it was too biased to the positive sides. We know that there are thorns in the Bronx.
Exactly.
And, roses have their thorns. And what about you? Same question.
I would say we're probably further on the spectrum toward editorializing, where you can certainly hear a little bit of our voice in it, and hopefully sometimes you get a little bit of the humor or the irreverence. We don't take ourselves that seriously. So, I mean, I think we sort of tell you what we think, and you might agree, you might not, but as long as you're reading, and you can certainly respond how you...
What about for anybody, what's the advice for anybody who says, wow, these are frankly two regular guys with other kinds of jobs, and they started one. Can't I just start one?
I think that anybody can, but the real trick is to keep it going, because there are a lot of blogs out there that are dead on the vine, and people say, oh, okay, I could just put up some posts, and then you'll see there's this flurry in the beginning. The first month, there's a post every day, and then it starts to really wither. So there was one that was pretty good about Riverdale. Parkway runs through it, hasn't posted in a very long time. Bronx Bohemian down, sort of covering the South Bronx and Mott Haven, has sort of dried up a little bit. So I think the staying power is what's really there. Anybody could start it.
And this goes back to the question, and I'm going to ask you the same question. I love this because I can ask both of them the same question, but it's about the responsibility. You feel a responsibility to the readers who are checking it out, so therefore you want to keep going, and of course you really have to make the commitment to doing it. What about for you, your thoughts on anybody who says, hey, he does Melrose, I could do Mott Haven, we could do any neighborhood in the Bronx.
Yeah, well, I agree.
Village.
Yeah, I agree with Lou. I would say go for it if you have the time to dedicate to it, because it is a responsibility. At first, when you start out, it might be a responsibility to yourself, as you try to discipline yourself to make the postings every day or every other day, whatever frequency you choose. But once you start getting that readership and you start getting the comments and people talking about it, then it becomes a whole different animal, and you have another set of responsibilities, and that becomes the viewers, which you want to just keep them informed and just try to give them what they want and try to find out what they want, which is probably the toughest part.
What's very interesting to me is that, in essence, we've made kind of covert celebrities out of frankly, two regular guys with a sense of civic responsibility. In other words, you really have the power of the pen, or whatever you want to call it. And the same thing for you and your wife, in that you can actually have some influence. Let's take a call or two, and then I want to ask about some specifics that are on and have been on your blogs. This is Ricky from Marshalloo is with us. Hello, Ricky. Nice to have you.
How are you, Gary?
Wait, hold on, Ricky. Say it again.
How are you, Gary?
Oh, fine, great.
Okay. My question is, doing these blogs, in the future, are they willing to do pressing with newspapers?
In other words, convert the medium from the internet and turn it into a newspaper.
Yes.
Okay, there would be some to do that. It's an interesting question.
I think the general trajectory is the opposite way. I think most physical papers are actually becoming, internet and online stuff. So I certainly don't have any desire to do that or any vision of doing that.
Maybe the beauty of it is that you don't have to do it. You can put it out there. You don't have to worry about printing it and distributing it.
No ink, no paper.
Yeah, I have to agree with Lou on that. No ink, no paper. News on the go. Sometimes if I see something, I'm on my phone and take an image and just boom, 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 type it in and send it into the blog, and it's there immediately. So I'm not sure about print.
I wonder, Jane, if we could put up the Welcome to Melrose that we had, because it's a very, very interesting story that's on there, and I'm just interested in things that you have done that maybe people won't get anywhere else. And that was the piece that you have on the historic district and the notion of the historic. I think there's the story on the courthouse that Ed was talking about earlier. If you scroll down there, just past this wonderful entry there, this right there, that's the one. That's a very, very interesting piece. Tell me a little bit about that. And you really spent a lot of time, a lot of internet space on it. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, that was very important to me. Living in the neighborhood, having the Grand Concourse basically part of our neighborhood, part of Melrose neighborhood. We found out about the meeting that the Landmarks Commission was having literally that same week. Somehow, Landmarks Commission sort of botched up a little bit the communication to the public, and it was supposed to be the first type of this meeting.
You are so kind. You are so, yes, somehow they just kind of decided not to inform the public.
They claimed that they informed the landlords, and they in turn were supposed to contact the residents. But when we were there, the limited number of people that were at the Bronx Museum, we all found out that none of the managing agents were informed because everybody made their calls. So to that end, this actually is taking on a life of its own. We're all getting together and trying to start up a group and a separate blog or even just a web page dedicated to this endeavor.
There were a number of things that were interesting to me, and you both know Jordan Moss of the Bronx News Network, and when Jordan was on the show, at one point debuting some aspect of that wonderful blog, we had a dialogue, and I expressed frustration that something like that, to me, I would think everybody would have something to say about it. I was disappointed when I read that there were no comments. Now, Lou talked about earlier he saw blogs in Queens and Brooklyn, and frankly, if something like that were posted on a Queens or Brooklyn blog, you'd get 50 comments before the night was out. Mm-hmm. Is there frustration? To me, there is frustration. Gee, I wish more people would be on there and have their say.
Well, actually, I had a little frustration at first because I didn't see the comments. But what I did was I started posting the piece on different sites like WiredNewYork.com, which is
so you really worked
exactly, and that started working up a lot of people. I started seeing a lot of comments on it, the pros and cons, why it should be a historic district. So.
I thought one of the answers, which I'm going to kind of seed the clouds here, is there is a digital divide, and there may be more computers per person in Queens and Brooklyn than there are available in a neighborhood like Melrose. Mm-hmm. Did you see that story anywhere else? You basically were a journalist then and wrote a unique, quote-unquote, exclusive story, right? That story was nowhere else.
That's
that
correct.
Was your story. Mm-hmm. Lou, stories that you have done that others don't? I have picked one out, but I'll ask you first. But I got one that is on there right now that I thought was fascinating.
Well, I mean, a lot of our unique stuff actually comes from like the Pedro Espada debacle.
That's the one I was going to talk about today.
I mean, of all the buildings he could have pretended to live in, to pick the one with, a couple nascent bloggers.
Oh, you live in that building?
Well, yeah, we live there. He doesn't, but
You believe he does? You know he does?
no.
You never see him there?
No, I mean, he obviously owns the apartment, and I don't know what constitutes residency legally, so I
Well-
can't speak to legalities, but
Yeah, I think legally it probably does constitute residency, but I wasn't aware that you lived in that building. I guess I missed that. The piece that I was talking about is I believe, in the roundup today, that because you take a lot of stuff from a really wide variety of news sources. It was from WGRX about his increase in staff since that happened. It's on that page, Jane. Just scroll down just slightly, and it's right in there somewhere. There it is, right in there. Something about Senator Espada spending a significant amount of money hiring staff. That was a story that I didn't read anywhere else in the Bronx, but you picked it out from somewhere else.
well, we actually got that from one of our very loyal readers, a guy named Jack, who comments a lot, and he actually sent that and said, here's a heads up. Here's a story about Espada's budget for staff and offices, and just offered it up, and we took it and ran with it.
To me, that was an interesting one. Another one was just you put up there, for instance, they're filming a movie at Mount St. Ursula. I mean, that's interesting. That's a kind of a fun thing. I hadn't heard about that. How did you know about that?
We usually get a lot of emails from Community Board 7, so if anything's happening, and I don't think Community Board 7 has as robust of a website. I think they might have a website, but we're able to help them get a little bit more exposure for their things that they need the community to know or want the community to know.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a relationship with the community board? What is that, 3? That's in
Community
here?
Board 1,
Community
and
Board
I've
1.
actually started going to some of the meetings and trying to develop some contacts
You know,
there.
it's interesting that Lou mentions Community Board 7 because I'm on their list as well. I would love to be on the list of every community board. I wonder if others have it. Now, does one put out stuff and give you information?
No, not yet.
But you see, that's the kind of thing, personally, I would like to see this, expand a little bit. So I want to ask you, did you have unique stories or things that you're kind of proud of breaking, or is the Espada residency, I mean, you didn't break it.
No.
everybody knew that
I mean,
story.
but we recently had something where his vehicle was parked in front of the fire hydrant using some police placard.
But that's right, and
it
that was
ended
your
up getting
story?
picked up. Yeah, it ended up getting picked up by the New York Post and all sorts of other places. I think I love doing the reviews of places to eat or things to go see. So I love being able to go to a restaurant and give people a little bit of a heads up, whether it's worth their dollars or not, and how to get
Best
there.
restaurant you did and wrote up?
Amelia's.
Amelia's over on Arthur Avenue.
Fantastic.
Been there-
My wife and I had our wedding rehearsal there. We go back every year for our anniversary.
Been there many times. Best restaurant in Melrose?
It's a toss-up between two, actually. But as far as a restaurant goes, Coqui Mexicano, which is on 161st Street and Brook Avenue.
Excuse me, is that up on the blog?
Yes, it is.
161st in Brook.
In
all
Brook.
right. And the name of it is? I'm right. You
It's,
think Suzanne and I are not going to be there? You're wrong. We're going.
Coqui Mexicano,
Okay.
and it's a Puerto Rican Mexican fusion restaurant.
Okay.
And then the other one is Peace Love Cafe, which is the first type of its cafe in the South Bronx. So it's, having, myself lived in Manhattan for a little bit and, took the cafes for granted, it was nice that now all of a sudden I can walk out my door and half a block, boom, I'm at a cafe that has live jazz music on the weekends and things like that, and could just sit down, sip some coffee, and read a book or the paper.
Now, you run real estate listings. Do you do that as well?
On occasion, whenever something comes up.
Do you find that people respond to that? I thought that, because you really spend some time doing that. Now, where do those come? Do those come from local papers? Or?
I use all sorts of websites. I look at Street Easy, I look at Trulia, I look at the New York Times, and just when I see things that are interesting, sometimes I want rentals from Craigslist. It's just seeing things that are under the radar, things that are bigger than normal or cheaper than normal, or I don't know, just things that strike my fancy.
Do you have people responded like, hey, thanks for the tip?
We had a few people. One most memorable was a woman who actually rented an apartment in Mott Haven because of one of our listings of the day, and just wrote this very effusively grateful email. It was actually very nice.
So you get. I'm sure you get some response like that as well.
Once in a while. I mean, there was someone that I know actually ended up renting an apartment because of the listing.
Let's talk a little bit. We don't have a ton of time, but about the politics. Now, you had weighed in. You weren't thrilled with what had happened at the Armory.
No, sir.
And so, I mean, we can rehash that slightly. We've talked about that issue plenty. But
Well, I think our chief concern was the strange focus on the supermarket thing, and I think that the real momentum that caught on at the end was the Morton Williams thing, was the supermarket thing, and I just think that's silly. I think Community Board 7 is a supermarket desert, and to say anything else is just false.
See, here's what's interesting, and I certainly, folks who have watched this show for years know that I know firsthand about this. If I say something or something like that, I hear about it. Did you hear about it afterwards?
Oh, there were lots of people. There were people.
I'm not talking about on the blog.
No, not a lot of people who spoke.
Well, they
to
didn't
me
know who
face
you
to
are.
face.
Now
Yeah,
they do.
exactly. Well, send emails, send angry emails.
But no, there was a vibrant dialogue.
Absolutely, and we really liked that. The one time when I thought it was getting a little bit too much, there were two commenters, where one was basically accusing somebody of being racist, and one person was accusing the other person of being dishonest and lazy. It was
I was reading that commentary, and you notice I stayed out of it and kept trying to get them. Let's talk about the issue. Let's talk about the issue.
Yeah.
Have you gotten involved with any controversial issues or anything like that?
The most controversial issue probably has been Boricua Village and Boricua College. There have been a number of people who've commented on the entry, trying to basically talk negative about Atlantic Yards and their practices and things like that.
In other words, the Boricua Village development is not totally positive, and so you just simply reporting it, but there are a lot of people who are not thrilled with it.
Exactly.
That's we're putting up all, if you want to, send emails, all that stuff is on the screen. You're looking for material, right?
Always.
Always. Material, comments, and all that. And it is welcome to melrose.com. And then, of course, boogiedowner.blogspot.com. Did I get both of those right?
You got it.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And the same thing, boogiedowner@gmail.com. That's the way to get to it. Gentlemen, thank you for continuing the dialogue that I think we've been doing here on this show in a different medium and in a different way and in a wholly, Bronx way, by, for, and about the Bronx.
Yes.
Welcome to melrose.com, boogiedowner.blogspot.com. I hope everybody will log on and have their say along with you and me. Folks, if you have comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, you can email them to us at BronxTalk@hotmail.com, and I'll read those on the air during a future program. Or you can email it to these guys, too, and they'll put it up there. You can also see archives of Bronx Talk at blip.tv. Just search for Bronx Talk. We'll be back with Bronx Talk next Monday night and every Monday night. We've been here for 15 years. Why not next week? And that is, of course, here on BronxNet's Cablevision Channel 67 and Verizon Fios Channel 33. Good night. Oh, and what's this? Big moment.